Bienvenido. Welcome. Today we are going on a journey to St. Bernard Parish to learn about Los Islenos. Spanish colonists from the Canary Islands set sail for Louisiana between 1778 and 1783 to populate the region and halt British expansion west of the Mississippi River. The Canary Islanders strategically settled in 4 locations around New Orleans to guard the city. Galveston, located below Baton Rouge, was the first settlement. The others were Valenzuela, located along Bayou Lafourche, Barataria, along Bayou des Familles, and La Concepcion, located along Bayou Terre-aux-Bœufs in St. Bernard Parish. After settling in Louisiana, the Canary Islanders officially became known as Los Islenos, or the Islanders. Of the 4 settlements, St. Bernard, which began in 1779 with land donated by Pierre Philippe de Marigny to the King of Spain for colonization, was the most successful settlement because Bayou Terre-aux-Bœufs granted them access to the Mississippi River, which made it possible for the Canary Islanders to travel to New Orleans to sell their products in the market. The Islenos furthered their involvement in America by actively fighting against the British in the Battle of New Orleans. The Islenos also brought the tradition of domesticating cattle to St. Bernard, as well as the process of granulating sugar, which began the sugar plantation influx on large estates along Bayou Terre-aux-Bœufs. Frank Fernandez, the first historian of St. Bernard, conceived the concept of establishing a museum that captured the cultural identity of St. Bernard Parish. Mrs. Rosa Ducros Tennant donated her parents' home in the St. Bernard village to the parish government in 1971. The house became known as the Louis Alfred Ducros MD Museum and Research Library. This was the beginning pivotal moment for what was known today as the Islenos Museum Complex. Since then, the complex consists of 9 structures and roughly 22 acres. Now, let us take a tour of this fine facility. El Museo de los Islenos was donated to the Society in St. Bernard Parish in 1980 by Marie-Louise Malero O'Toole and her sister Mabel Isabel Malero Catois. The original museum was constructed as a private home by Vicente Núñez de Villavicencio around 1840. Manuel Malero purchased the house and property in 1944. Originally, the museum had 6 rooms. Sadly, in 2005, Hurricane Katrina triggered an 8-foot oak tree to collapse onto the front of the museum. Since then, the old museum had to be demolished and a new museum with an exterior replica of the Malero house erected. Today, the museum is comprised of many replicas and artifacts of the Canary Island culture pre-Louisiana and the Islenos culture in Louisiana. When visitors first enter the museum, they will receive a taste of culture and life in the Canary Islands. The museum features traditional clothing worn in the Canary Islands, guanches, pottery, woven baskets, and many more artifacts. Many traditions and ways sailed with the Canary Islanders to Louisiana, like their Roman Catholicism, for example. As spoken earlier, the Islenos worked on sugar plantations. However, as they grew tiresome of sugarcane, some Islenos resettled in eastern St. Bernard around 1820. This move brought about the firm establishment of the Delacroix Island fishing community, and by the end of the 19th century, Wyclosky and Shell Beach near Lake Bourne were thriving communities inhabited by Isleno fishermen. Following the Civil War, trapping animals for fur became a particularly important livelihood for the Islenos. The fur industry soared to become a multi-million-dollar industry in Louisiana prior to the 1940s. Hunting became just as important for not only dinner for Isleno families, but also dinner for those in New Orleans who would buy these animals to cook. Now that we know some history about the Islenos, let's explore the structures that they frequented. The homes of the Islenos along Terre-aux-Bœufs were virtually identical to many homes of small farmers. The typical house of that time possessed 4 rooms with porches in the front and the rear. There were normally 2 storage rooms connected to the rear porch, and the kitchens were always detached from the residence. Our first stop is the Estobanol house. The Spanish government originally constructed this house around 1790. The house belonged to Maria Artiles, who willed it to her grandson, Joseph Estobanol, the father of the notable Martin Albert Estobanol, a well-known politician and community leader. The house fits the typical mold with a kitchen in a separate building and 4 rooms in the residence. However, this house possesses a unique aspect to it, the buissage. The buissage is a mixture of mud, moss, and animal hair that was placed between the cypress studs to create insulation. The next house is the Esteves house, which was donated by brothers August and Burton Esteves in 2000. The house, an 1890 farmhouse constructed by their grandfather August Esteves, has interior walls covered with cypress boards. Together with the French doors and the cypress floors, the historic fabric of the structure is elaborated. The cypress was not only for show, but was also used to survive flooding from the Mississippi River as well as, recently, Hurricane Katrina. Now, when it was time for families to fur trap, they temporarily relocated to their trapper's cabin. The Calvin Mellarine Trapper's Cabin was designed by the late Calvin Mellarine in 2002. Unfortunately, Hurricane Katrina toppled another oak tree down to crush the cabin. In 2007, the cabin was reconstructed. In 1997, Joanne Mesa donated the Coconut Island Bar Room to the Society. The bar room was built in 1923 using salvaged cypress from older structures. This bar became a place of commerce and community gatherings because fur trappers, buyers, and politicians frequented it. Famous musicians like Alcide Nunez, an important 20th century jazz musician, played at the barroom and dance hall. Today, when visitors enter the barroom, they will be greeted by the original bar, the kerosene pump, table, chairs, upright piano, and an air compressor to captivate the original atmosphere. The last and just as important structure is the Crescip Caserta house. This house is unique for many reasons. Gaetano Caserta, a Sicilian immigrant and farmer, constructed the house in 1910. Lumber salvaged from the slave quarters at the Reunion Plantation for the interior walls were painted with yellow-tinted lime wash, which is still visible today. Judge Wayne Crescip donated the house in 2002. The Islenos were not too exclusive. Many of the descendants mingled with multiple cultures like the Sicilians and the Homa Indians, to name a few. Visitors see the different cultures as they venture down the Calvin Mellarine Nature Trail, which was constructed in 2003. The nature trail guides visitors past farming equipment used by Sicilians, as well as Homa Indian huts made from palmetto trees. If you keep walking down the trail, you will enter wooded wetlands, where you encounter the landscape used by the Islenos descendants. The trail continues past a swampy moret, which grew in part of the abandoned Mississippi riverbed. Nevertheless, the remaining elderly Islenos speak the archaic Spanish dialect. However, just like the wetlands die to coastal erosion, the culture of St. Bernard dies each day with their descendants. To preserve their identity, Los Islenos Heritage and Cultural Society was formed. The Los Islenos Cultural Society works diligently to maintain these grounds along with St. Bernard Parish government. You can visit the Society's website to see how you can be involved in the efforts to make our identity eternal. Thank you for listening.